What is going on, nerds? Today I'm talking about some crazy decks that are doing well in the new meta that's coming to us soon when the Temporal Forces set releases. So, Temporal Forces is the first set of the next block. Every year there's a new block, and also every year a block rotates. So, when Temporal Forces come out, a year of cards will be rotating. All cards from Battle Styles and Fusion Strike, and some others, will be out of the format. They'll be completely gone. And that leads to a brand new meta with a lot of weird decks you wouldn't expect doing well. So while the meta isn't in our format yet, Japan has been playing in it for a little while. And daily, they have some really interesting tournaments. They have city leagues, which are almost always 64-player tournaments, and some crazy stuff has been winning. So let's get right into it. Let's see. So the first interesting new deck that's been doing well, and this one won a city league, is Future Box, but it's really his Turbo Iron Hands. So it plays Maridon, which what it does is for one colorless, does 40, and then search your deck for 2 basic energy cards, attach them to your future Pokemon any way you like, which powers up Iron Hands, gets a bunch of energy on it, and then for 4 energy, Iron Hands is 120, you knock them out, you take an extra prize card. And of course, you still have Electric Generator power up Iron Hand on top of the Maridon. Get an early Iron Hands, take multiple prizes, but you don't do much damage. So you play the other new card, Iron Crown EX, which increases the damage of your future Pokemon by 20, essentially allowing Iron Hands to 2-hit huge things and 1-hit small things for extra prizes, which is really powerful. Now, of course, your Iron Hands get knocked out, you lose a bunch of energy. But a new card, Heavy Baton, is also really good, which if the active Pokemon at the pre-cost of 4 is knocked out, you use 3 basic energy to 1 of your bench. So you knock out your Iron Hands, you get to keep 3 of the energy on it because of the new tool attached to it, which ends up keeping energy on the board and allowing you to continue attacking with Iron Hands, and it's really strong. The rest of the deck is just super consistent, maybe some Ancient support, lots of Gust with counter catchers, and gift energies to keep your hand high. Super powerful deck, but definitely not the only thing that's going to be performing in this format. A returning deck that looks like it's won City League. Oh, that's actually second at the City League, but there's another one that won one. Is Arceus. Oh, this is not what I expected. Arceus Pidgeot. I was thinking this is a Charizard. That's what I look like on the end, but no. It's just an Arceus Pidgeot with Zacian V-Star. This got second out of like 64 players. Zacian V-Star is just really powerful. It does high damage, 200 for 3 energy, or 310 for 4 energy. It's a V-Star power. And along with Arceus powering up, you're just hitting high damage, which can really beat a lot of stuff. The new Ace spec, which is a deck card that you can only have 1 of per deck, says the Pokemon's card attached to you gets 100 HP as a tool. So now this Zacian V-Star, which only has 270 HP, now has 370 HP. That's really hard to KO, especially when you're doing high damage. You can also play Grass Energy for Iron Leaves, which when you play it down, you can move it to the active and move energy from your bench Pokemon onto it. Essentially moving a bunch of Grass Energy to it from your other Pokemon. And then it does 180 for 3 energy, but with weakness, you one-hit KO Charizard EX, which turns out to be one of the best decks around. This is getting second in the City League. It's a crazy, weird deck, and yet it's getting second out of 64 players, so it must actually be kind of good. And the Pidgeot EX, of course, searches out stuff. Now let's go back here and see what won the most recent City League. Charizard Arceus. So Charizard is still good, probably the best deck around. It's so powerful. But what's interesting, a lot of people are pivoting to play Beaverrail in their Charizard lists instead of playing Pidgeot. A lot of people are just not playing Pidgeot on them anymore. Because you can use TM Evolution and get evolved early. And then you're not as hurt by Iono because Beaverrail just draws up. And also, because Battle VIP rotates, you can play Friendship Poffin, or actually, I think it's called Buddy Putty Poffin is the actual translation in English. You search for 2 base Pokemon 70 HP or less and put them on your bench, which essentially just allows you to get a bunch of Bidoofs in play, where otherwise you can't really get your Rotom V in Pidgeotzard, which is really annoying, which is why this is so good. This one also plays Prime Catcher, which is kind of like Cross Switcher, where you switch both actives, except it's a single card and an Ace spec, which you can only play 1 Ace spec per deck. But it's so powerful just to be able to gust up and switch your own active. Definitely worth playing. And the rest of the list is pretty straightforward. It does have Arceus V Star, which we haven't seen in Zard in a while, but it is very consistent. Again, 2 cards. Yeah. Lost Box is still good. Both Giratina and other Lost Boxes. So this one plays, it's pretty much just a Paradox Box. Have you seen in the past the Roaring Moon Iron Hands decks that play a bunch of Mirage Gate to get energy on them? They still exist now, and they're very strong. Friendship Coffin allows you to get Pokemon on your bench, get a bunch of Comfies early game, and you don't even have to use them on the first turn. And then Emergency Board, a new card, reduces your retreat cost by 1, which allows you to just attach it to a Comfy and retreat it every single time, which is super nice. Tough thing is Escape Rope rotates, but it doesn't matter too much when you have Iron Bundle, which once per turn you can discard from play and make your opponent switch or active, which is huge for these decks. And then Tina Lost Box is still good as well. It ends up playing Iron Leaves, which I mentioned earlier that it can switch into the active and move grass over. So you can one-hit a Charizard, and then you one-hit another Charizard with Tina's V-Star Power, Star Requiem, which you might know of. 10 cards in Lost Zone, just one-hit anything. And then you boss Pidgeot EX, these are 2 boss's orders that you play, and knock out the Pidgeot, and you just take all of your prizes, which means despite not having Path to Peak anymore because that rotates, you can still beat Charizard with Tina, which is really interesting. And of course, you play still Roxanne and Iono because it's just so powerful to have. The list looks pretty similar, but you got to replace Path with some other consistency cards, which is interesting. Maybe it's more consistent, though, because you're not playing the Path build. You're playing consistent cards instead. Very interesting. Now, the deck that has actually won a huge tournament, not even a City League, if you look at the Champions League, which is a 2,600 player tournament, it was won by Lugia Archeops, which used to be good, but hasn't seen much play recently. And the real reason it's good is because the new card, Chinchino. For 2 colorless, does 70 for each special energy card attached to its Pokemon. If you didn't know how Lugia works, its V-Star Power gets 2 Archeops into play, each of which can search for 2 special energy every turn. Therefore, each turn with Archeops can get 4 special energy on a Chinchino and be hitting 280. But if you attach one from your hand, then you're actually hitting 350 with a 1 prizer, which is huge. You can KO almost anything. Plus, a new energy from the set, Miss Energy, prevents effects done to the Pokemon it's attached to, which means your opponent, if they're playing something like Roaring Moon or Lost Tino with Star Requiem, can't easily one-hit KO you if you have Miss Energy attached, which is also really powerful and makes this deck much better than it was before rotation. Another card, an Ace-Spec Master Ball, which just searches for a Pokemon. It's super powerful to get your Archeops because you have to get them in the discard to use Lugia's V-Star Power to get them back. It's a really solid deck. And there's even more crazy decks at this tournament. This whole tournament is crazy. Arceus Vulpix. So, Alolan Vulpix V-Star. For a water, 2 colorless is 160, and next turn takes no damage from Pokemon with abilities. Well, Charizard EX in this format is pretty much the best deck, and that card happens to have an ability. So Alolan Vulpix in a meta where almost everyone's playing Charizard EX can completely shut down the deck. And it's really powerful. And you also play Professor Turo's Scenario and Sharon's Care to pick up your bench Pokemon, so all you have in play is a Vulpix. You can also attach Mist Energy to block effects of attacks in case there's some effect that can go past Vulpix. Nope. You can block that too with Mist Energy and just completely shut down your opponent. Really cool list. And kind of crazy it's doing well. Sorry about Herald popping up. I closed my window. Of course, Zard doing well. Snorlax doing well. It's very similar. It does lose Echoing Horn, but it still works similar, and there's a Mantine with a similar attack to Echoing Horn. So it's still solid. Arctina kind of coming back. People playing it, especially with Iron Leaves out now to beat Charizard with Arctina, which used to be a very hard matchup. And then a new deck, an Ancient Box. So this makes up of Roaring Moon and Koraidon. Roaring Moon does 70 damage plus 10 more for each Ancient card in your discard, which scales over time, especially with new Ancient card, Explora's Guidance, which looks at the top 6 cards of your deck and puts 2 in your hand and discards the rest. Which essentially means you can get a lot of cards in your hand and a good bit in the discard. It sees deeper than Chorus Experiment. Oh, sorry, it puts 2 in your hand, yeah, discards the rest. So you get 2 cards in hand, but it sees deeper than Chorus Experiment, while also being an Ancient card to boost your damage. And you can discard even more cards with it, to go along with Roaring Moon's damage for cards and discard. Super powerful. And then you have Koraidon, which for fighting colorless is 30 for each ancient Pokemon in play. Which, of course, in this deck, based on ancient Pokemon, you're going to have a lot in play. The other kind of unique card in this deck is Fluttermane, which is an ancient Pokemon that if it's in the active, your opponent's active has no abilities. Which means if your opponent's playing a deck like Charizard or Arceus or many other things right now, they can't use the ability they're active and therefore are much slowed down while you get busy getting cards in the discard to increase Roaring Moon's damage. And the final new card for this is Awakening Drum, which just draws a card for each of your ancient Pokemon in play. It is an ace spec, but it's 100% worth playing because it's so consistent to draw when you're playing so many ancient Pokemon. Very powerful. A lot of the decks here are similar. The future box I talked about earlier with Iron Hands is here. And there's one other brand new deck in Great Tusk Mill. It's another ancient deck that's based off playing the ancient supporters, which for 2 colorless, it discards top card of your opponent's deck, or discards the top 4 if you play an ancient supporter from your hand this turn. Essentially allowing you to discard a whole bunch of their deck, which is super powerful. And while these are the ones placed in big tournaments, as I mentioned earlier, small tournaments are having some even weirder stuff placed. This may seem weird, but I mentioned earlier some weird stuff. Let's go back to the City Leagues and look at one more deck. Espathra. What? You might have seen this card. It increases the attack cost of your opponent's active by 1 colorless. Then for 1 psychic, does 30 plus 30 more for each energy attached to both actives, which seems kind of weak overall. But apparently in this format, it's actually good. Likely because of the speed Friendship often gives the deck to get set up faster. Because you can get your Zatus in play to get energy in play on your Espathra, and it's really surprisingly powerful, despite seeming like it might be weak. The other important card I mentioned earlier, Hero's Cape, increasing your HP by 100, makes Espathra not only hard to attack because you have to get more energy in play, but even harder to attack after it has a bunch more HP. Very weird, but this won a 64-player tournament, so maybe it's better than we expect. And other than that, there's other well-known decks that are doing well. There's Qian Pao, which is well-known. It's very similar, but it's actually better now just because Codebreaker Solution exists, which search your deck for 2 cards and puts them on top. Goes really well with your Bibarel to get whatever you need. And I guess let's talk about one last deck before ending the video, which is Dialga V-Star. The new set introduces a new Metang, which once per turn looks at top 4 cards of your deck, attaches any metal energy you find there to your Pokemon, which powers up Dialga V-Star, which for 5 energy does 220 and takes an extra turn. It is a V-Star power, but if you KO something with this, and then use Boss's Orders and use its first attack, which does huge damage if you have a lot of energy on it, you could be taking 4 prizes at once or more, which is really powerful and not all that hard to power up when you can use Evolution TM to get up Metangs early. Super powerful deck, all of these, and also some super weird decks. But I'm sure they're going to be very interesting. I'm very much looking forward to the Temporal Forces meta. I hope you enjoyed my deep dive into all these crazy decks doing well. And that's not even all of them, but those are the ones I have time for today. I'll see ya.